Hi, I'm Rina DeMillo. Welcome to Asian American Life. Did you know that New York City has nearly 1,400 art galleries? Today, we're taking you inside one of them. I'm at the Silverlens Gallery in Chelsea. We'll have more on the gallery, plus the exhibits coming up. But first, here's what's ahead on our show. It's Stomach Cancer Awareness Month. Why are Asian Americans at high risk? Plus CPC One rises, my special report on a community for all. Start Lighthouse advances literacy through a diversity lens. And Broadway's Yellowface takes on racial politics. This and more on Asian American Life.
New York City is arguably the world's #1 art market, generating up to $5 billion in sales each year. And some of the best galleries are in Chelsea, where a renowned gallery from the Philippines set up shop to showcase contemporary art by Asian and Asian American artists.
So we like the space because it transforms depending on the shows and the fact that you can kind of welcome people in from the street.
Tucked under the shade of the High Line sits a rare find in the Chelsea Art District, the Silverlens Gallery, where contemporary art by Asian and Asian American artists get their spotlight.
Patricia Perez Eustaquio really works with a lot of materials. What she's working with is abaca, which is banana fiber.
This kind of braiding is something that she learned from pre-colonial gold weaving.
Isa Lorenzo and Rachel Rillo are the power couple behind the influential Silverlens Gallery in Manila, Philippines. They planted their flag in New York in 2022.
I think during the pandemic, everyone sort of was looking for what they didn't know and was going back into the gaps.
Silverlens was founded by Lorenzo in Manila in 2004. After exhibiting Rio's work at the gallery a few years later, the two became partners in love and the intersection of art and commerce. Exhibiting Southeast Asian artists onto a global stage had always been their North Star. It led them to Chelsea.
And we came to visit for a month in 2021, and we looked at every single show, whether it was museums or galleries, and it was all, Black artists. And we thought, wow, maybe there's space for brown artists, or artists who come from brown places.
And the time was right. Silverlens' first opening was packed.
There were
like 1,000
I think
people.
1,000 people in and out.
Rachel and I were standing outside, shell-shocked, just like, what did we do?
What's happening?
What is this?
It was just so moving.
And the world of art was also moving in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the campaigns to stop anti-Asian hate.
Part of claiming space. Like, you can't treat us bad because we're gonna push back. That's part of this claiming we are here. You have to see us.
In recent years, major institutions have given shine to Asian American artists, from Pasita Abad's retrospective at MoMA's PS1 in New York, to Paul Pfeiffer's retrospective at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles.
Just a place to belong is something very powerful. We want to create this embrace, when people enter big institutions, by making connections with artists, with artworks that they show.
That marks a stark difference between Silverlens Gallery in Manila and New York.
Of course, we would love to have a bunch of private collectors here, just, snapping stuff up off the walls. But it's a long game here. It's institutions, it's the big global institutions. It's regional museums that come. It's university museums who need work or artwork in their collections as teaching tools.
Still, running a bicontinental gallery is not easy, even if Silverlens had arrived where it was conceived more than 2 decades ago, when Lorenzo got a photo degree from Parsons and took a walk in the neighborhood.
One of the very first galleries I walked into was here on 24th Street, Matthew Marks, 20-some years ago. It was just, the theatricality of it, I was so drawn to.
Lorenzo brought scale to Silverlens Manila and gave Southeast Asian artists a stage. The full circle of their journey has yet to sink in.
It's unreal. It's unreal.
We still say to each other, like, we have a gallery in Chelsea. So it's still, you know, a pinch moment.
But don't be fooled by their demeanor. They mean serious business.
We are a commercial art gallery, but it's more than that. We have a bigger goal.
Which is?
To colonize the West.
For Asian American Life, I'm Rainer Ramirez.
I'm Hyun. Stomach cancer is the 5th most common cancer worldwide, and Asians and Asian Americans are disproportionately affected. I spoke with one leading expert about why this is and what is being done to help those at high risk.
Per 100,000 people, Asian Americans, depending upon where they come from, have at least a 7-fold chance of getting a gastric cancer as compared to, for example, non-Hispanic whites.
Gastroenterologist Dr. Chul Hyun is the director of the Gastric Cancer Prevention and Screening Program at the Yale School of Medicine. He says the 5-year survival rate of stomach cancer in the United States is staggeringly low at 33%, compared to the survival rate in South Korea and Japan, which is more than double, about 70%. This, he says, is owing to the many barriers that cause health disparities for Asian Americans, chief among them the lack of health literacy.
We're talking about the lack of awareness about the diseases and their risks and their symptoms and so on. So for immigrants to be able to navigate the healthcare in this country is very challenging. And these facts are also compounded by the fact that many healthcare providers in this country are not culturally competent. In other words, they're not aware of these issues. And the last but not least, we have a policy and systemic barriers, where, for example, in gastric cancer, there is no systematic screening guidelines, even for high-risk populations.
So compared to the routine colonoscopies that Americans are very used to getting starting age 50 or so, this is not the case for screenings for stomach cancer.
Exactly. Gastric cancer has a very high incidence and mortality, but they happen to take place in the minority populations, Asian Americans and Hispanic Americans. But there is no structured guideline available for screening gastric cancer.
So when you talk about the 70% survival rates in Korea and Japan compared to the US, it has a lot to do with the early screenings.
That's right, yeah. The survival rate of gastric cancer in Japan and South Korea used to be very low, 2-3 decades ago. But then they started from 20 years ago, a biennial screenings by endoscopy starting age 40. So there has been a tremendous impact of this screening system, such that the survival rate has increased from 40% to 70% in 20 years. I think we need something like that for the population that are at high risk in the U.S.
So what are the reasons for the higher incidence in this Asian demographic?
It's both environmental and genetic. The known risk factors, there are many known risk factors for gastric cancer. The first one is Helicobacter pylori infection, which is a bacteria that basically parasitizes in the stomach lining cells and live there and then cause inflammation for a long time. For example, it can develop into something we call intestinal metaplasia, which can eventually turn into gastric cancer in many years later in some of the patients.
What are the symptoms that people should be looking out for?
So when we talk about symptoms, we can see people who are complaining of like a persistent epigastric pain or indigestion or heartburns. People can complain of nausea, vomiting. People can complain about difficulty swallowing. And also they can complain about black tarry stool associated with a decrease in hemoglobin level, anemia, for example. People can have the fatigue and easy fatigue and weakness and weight loss and difficulty having eating foods and so on. So when they have these symptoms and we find the gastric cancer, it's usually stage 3 or 4. And this is why we have a very low survival rate.
One important milestone that took place earlier this year was the introduction of the Stomach Cancer Prevention and Early Detection Act in Congress that will help to raise awareness among general populations and healthcare providers and advance prevention in high-risk populations. I'm Hyun for Asian American Life.
The largest nonprofit organization serving the Asian American community finally has a permanent home in Manhattan. Come take a tour of CPC One with me. For the Hwangs, CPC is like a second home.
我没想到 CPC 帮助我们很大，华策会给了我们这些特殊家庭非常多的关照和温暖。华策会引导我们，我们也学会了为我们的权利去倡导。
Zhiyang, an immigrant from China, learned about CPC, the Chinese American Planning Council, from a friend. She was looking for care options for her daughter who has Down syndrome. For Holly, CPC has been transformative.
他很自信，华策会他们就是组织了很多公益活动，我们都参加了，所以找回了那个自信，自信心很强。
Confident enough for Holly to perform a dance for her mom on Mother's Day.
Really too happy.
Very too happy, CPC, yeah.
Transforming lives and empowering families. That is what CPC has done for 60 years. It is the nation's largest Asian American social services nonprofit organization serving immigrant and low-income families.
Never did I think that we would arrive at the 60th anniversary.
Virginia Key founded CPC in 1965 when an influx of Chinese immigrants arrived in New York. The former schoolteacher just wanted a place for her students to go after school while their parents worked. Today, CPC has expanded beyond Chinatown, offering more than 50 programs at 35 sites in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, currently serving more than 80,000 New Yorkers.
I feel that whatever we're doing, we're trying to build up our people, give them the help, the safety net that they need so that we can be a better city, a better nation.
And this year, another dream for Key has come true, a permanent home in Manhattan. The 92-year-old was all smiles as she helped cut the ribbon for the grand opening of CPC One, a 16-story building on Suffolk Street.
I felt such a thankfulness in my heart because it not only that the bricks and mortar were up, but it showed where we have come and how far we have come since the beginning of CPC. And this building is symbolic of the progress Asian Americans have made in New York City.
We've known for decades that Asian Americans are the city's fastest growing racial group, but unlike other communities, we have not had the opportunity to show our stamp and put our stake in the ground and say that we are here, we are New Yorkers, and we are Americans.
According to the latest census data, the Asian population in New York City is one of the fastest growing, 1.4 million people representing 16% of the city's population. It's also a community that continues to struggle.
So too often, the Asian American community struggles with the model minority stereotype that we're all doing well, we're going to the best schools, and we have good jobs. But that's not true. About a quarter of Asian Americans struggle with poverty, about a third of Asian American older adults struggle with poverty, and that's why CPC provides culturally competent and language accessible services to our community members. And this allows them to do everything from learn English, to stay engaged with their own family members or in the community, and to be empowered so that they're out there voting and making sure that decision makers respond to our community members' needs and priorities.
Many of those services you'll find at CPC One. Wayne Ho, president and CEO of CPC, gave us a tour of the new mixed-use campus, which includes 3 floors of community space where they hold a range of workshops, from parenting to work training. Programs essential when it comes to helping immigrants navigate the oftentimes complicated U.S. system.
This is our Manhattan Community Center, and CPC does serve individuals who live in Brooklyn and Queens, but we started here in Chinatown and the Lower East Side, and that's why we always wanted to have a permanent home down here. And we are providing services to community members of all ages and backgrounds. And through this project, we also brought in over 200 units of affordable housing. So that means that older adults and other low-income community members have a permanent place to live where they can age in place.
CPC can be a game changer, and it's why clients like the Hwangs are now paying it forward. The mother and daughter are now active in the special needs community, advocating for others like them, because they and CPC know many families still need the hand up.
We're here to work, we're here to serve, and we're here for decades to come.
I'm Ernabelle DeMillo for Asian American Life.
The myth that all Asians are strong students is dispelled when you look at subgroups that face a number of academic challenges. One of those challenges is childhood illiteracy, an issue the group Start Lighthouse is tackling head-on.
Books can really serve as windows to the world, and so it's our job, it's our responsibility to be able to expose them to just a world of possibilities.
Combating childhood illiteracy by providing access to books is a mission that Rina Madhani, co-founder and executive director of the nonprofit Start Lighthouse, embarked on during the height of the pandemic.
And I actually was a classroom teacher in the South Bronx during that time. And so I got a call from one of my students' family members just asking for additional learning materials, resources, and books. That was the number one thing that they needed at home during that time. And so I realized I had a call to answer not only for my student, but for the community at large. And that was the beginning of Start Lighthouse.
Since its inception, Start Lighthouse has distributed more than 20,000 books to the tune of almost $500,000 to Title I public schools, where at least 40% of the students come from low-income families.
We distributed brand new multicultural books, learning materials, bilingual comprehension guides. We would package them together into these literacy toolkits, and we're really intentional about the curation of the literature that we provide to our students. We really believe in the power of multicultural literature because we just think that our students should be able to see themselves in the books that they're reading, be able to identify with the characters in the book, be able to see similar lived experiences.
A belief that's instrumental in helping children from different AAPI communities where English is a second language. According to Pew Research Center, English proficiency varies considerably among Asian subgroups. For example, among those ages 5 and older, 85% of Japanese and 82% of Indians speak English proficiently, whereas only 36% of Bhutanese and 38% of Burmese speak a proficient level of English. These groups with a high number of newly settled immigrants tend to have the lowest rates of English competency, making programs like Start Lighthouse invaluable.
We rehabilitate these abandoned, defunct library spaces within the hearts of our public schools and convert them into vibrant Start Lighthouse literacy hubs where we provide programming during the day, after school, and throughout the summer. This literacy hub is meant to be the safe haven for our students and their families, and for it to be an integral part of the school's community, its identity, and ultimately to revitalize the school's culture around how reading is perceived.
The nonprofit also leads workshops every month to train parents on how to become reading partners for their children.
Because we really believe that every child can meet us where they need to, and it's all about finding that entry point for their literacy that journey. And so these books are purchased by our organization, but then we also have incredible partnerships with publishing partners like Scholastic, Macmillan, Penguin Random House, who also generously donate these books that we ultimately curate. We ultimately want to work together hand in hand with our school partner to be able to close the literacy gap. We want to make sure that every single child's reading proficiently by 4th grade.
Start Lighthouse currently operates 3 full-time literacy hubs in the city, and they're working on creating more with a wait list of over 50 schools. For more information, go to startlighthouse.org. For Asian American Life, I'm Susan Jun.
I'm Vivian Lee. Storytelling often contains elements of autobiography without the writer actually naming a character after himself. Then there's Yellowface, now playing on Broadway until late November. Playwright David Henry Hwang not only names the character with his own initials, he places a humiliation from his own professional life front and center in the story.
And the winner of the American Theater Wing's Tony Award is M. Butterfly. Author David Henry Hwang.
Imagine being the first Asian American playwright ever to win a Tony.
I'd like to thank the real-life French diplomat who carried on an affair for 20 years with a Chinese actress without realizing that she was actually a man.
The unprecedented honor grants you status to lead the charge against the use of Yellowface when Miss Saigon arrives on Broadway in 1990.
I wrote this letter to Actors Equity objecting to the casting, and that sort of kicked off the whole brouhaha. And then it was pretty traumatic, that whole being at the center of a culture war incident.
The brouhaha inspires you to write another drama about racial stereotypes, Face Value, but it becomes an expensive flop that's canceled before opening night. Now, 3 decades later, that failure has inspired this comedy to land on Broadway.
Somewhere out there, our star is waiting for us to find him.
We are looking to cast this role with an Asian.
As you should.
Does he look Asian to you?
Starring Daniel Day Kim as David Henry Hwang, dubbed DHH, the chuckles begin after DHH discovers he mistakenly cast a white actor for the Asian American lead in his play, and in a bid to protect his reputation, tries to cover it up.
You're Asian, right?
Well, my ancestry is really mixed up. Marcus is mixed race Asian.
Can you imagine if this got into the papers?
If I was going to make fun of somebody, I might as well just make the lead character me, because that way, you know, I could only offend myself. There is something about, you know, surviving a car wreck, which is kind of liberating. But in general, at sort of a larger point, I think it is important as artists to give ourselves permission to fail.
In Yellowface, Hwang explores the tension between being revered and torn down, sometimes by your own tribe. When he won the Tony for writing M. Butterfly, some labeled Hwang a sellout because his play used elements and music from Puccini's Madame Butterfly. That opera about a white man who loves, then leaves a 15-year-old Japanese girl who then kills herself is widely seen as racist, sexist, and imperialist. This very criticism comes up in M. Butterfly.
But because it's an Oriental who kills herself for a Westerner, you find it beautiful.
And Butterfly borrows less from Puccini than from the true story of a French diplomat who had a decades-long affair with a Chinese diva who was secretly a man and a spy. And M. Butterfly's success helped the Miss Saigon protests hit their mark. Actor Jonathan Pryce, in Yellowface, went on to win a Tony for his performance as the Eurasian pimp. But every other staging of Miss Saigon since has featured actors of Asian heritage playing the Asian roles.
We sort of lost the battle but won the war, in the sense that this was the first time that this issue of Yellowface had been raised with any profile in American history. Since then, at least producers were put on notice that if they were going to do this, if they're going to do Yellowface casting, they'd have to deal with a lot of stuff.
Ask the Icelandic Opera. Its production of Madame Butterfly last year was blasted as dehumanizing for casting white actors in yellowface, proof that the conversation is still relevant.
Yellowface is a play that is simultaneously trying to look at the ways in which race is a construct, while also holding the reality that race continues to be extremely consequential, and when racist things happen, we have to call them out.
To see more of David Henry Hwang in conversation with host Patrick Pacheco, check out September's episode of Theater, All the Moving Parts on CUNY TV. For Asian American Life, I'm Vivian Lee.
And that's our show for now. Be sure to visit the Silverlens Gallery in Chelsea to check out the contemporary art. And follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Asian American Life. And we now have a CUNY TV app, so download the app and watch us on the go. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. I'll see you next time.